So welcome to the session. With me today I have Eva CENDON, who is the Vice President of Eucen. She will be talking later on, and then Wieger BAKKER, who is our professor from Utrecht University, our main speaker today about the conference coming next year. So what happens today? This is the outline of this session. So first I will say a few words about the coming conference. What is it all about? How to get in? And then Wieger will give an insider's view to the conference. What is there to expect? What are the topics that we are going to discuss? And he will kind of lay a view on the Dutch landscape of higher education. Then right after Wieger's presentation, we will go to Eva, who will be sharing with us some ideas about call for contributions, what is there to be expected. And after that, just before we close, we will have the comments and maybe questions for the both parts of the today's speeches. So let's get started. So welcome to this closing session, looking forward to the future. And here we will discuss how the Open Fora is connected to the next topics of our network. So hopefully the vaccinations will be effective and we can all travel to Utrecht. The conference will be 1st to 4th in June. So I hope that everybody would mark their calendars now to the beginning of June to travel to Utrecht for our seminar or conference. And here I might give a very short advertising speech that you might remember that you can request an offer pack from Eucen that includes the subscription fee to next year and also the registration to the conference with a special discount. So please pay attention to messages from the Eucen office and Carme about this. Then also the website is up and running, and it is a very nice website, so please have a look later on that. You can also register, and then there's information about call for contributions that Eva will be presenting a little bit later. But now I think to save time, we can already go to the contents or the aims of this conference. And here I will give the floor to Wieger, who is Dean and lifelong learning professor from the Society-Oriented Higher Education Faculty of Law, Economics and Governance at the University of Utrecht. And I have had the pleasure with the Finnish National Network to already visit Wieger and his team and the University of Utrecht to discuss some of those topics that he will be sharing. So I think it's a very, very big pleasure to greet you and welcome to talk to us, Wieger. Please.
Thank you very much, Timo. Thank you very much for inviting me to this last session of this interesting series. Indeed, I am since a few years. I'm at Utrecht University. I am Utrecht University Dean for Lifelong Learning, and maybe it's good to tell you a little bit where that comes from, so that you know who is talking to you. I am a sociologist by training in the field of public governance and public administration. And in the course of my career, I have been working in research on changes of educational systems. I've been working on citizenship, but one of the things that I've been doing for a long period of time is lecturing and designing also executive programs. And I think that was one of the reasons that I was asked to join and since 2016 already existing a program to enhance lifelong learning at Utrecht University. I'm based at the Utrecht School of Governance, part of the Faculty of Law, Economics and Governance. And this is one of the themes that is also in that department already for a quite long time one of our central elements in our primary process, but there we are still a bit of an outlier. And we hope to share also our insights and ideas with within the university and beyond. What I would like to do today is to contextualize a little bit for you this year's conference theme. And I was asked to show a little bit on how the Dutch educational system looks, also what place continuing education is taking in that system of that landscape of higher education. And from there, I want to introduce you to a few of the elements of the present policies on further developing continuing education at Utrecht University, and then put the conference a little bit in perspective. Um, uh, as I understood, afterwards there will be ample time for discussion and for all your questions. And I can imagine that maybe the Dutch system is not familiar to anyone. That's the reason that I share start with a few slides to show you a bit on where higher education stands in the Dutch system. The Dutch system is known for its complexity and high levels of differentiation in all kinds of levels that are not even visualized here. But what you can see is that in secondary school there is pre-university education, and also which is called VWO, and there is also senior general secondary education, which also gives access to higher education, either through to shifting to the pre-university education and from there go to higher education, or directly. And that relates and that refers also to the, could say, the binary system that we have in the Netherlands. And we have two systems of higher education that are relatively separated from each other, although fortunately enough there are more and more cooperation between the two of them. One is the universities of applied sciences, and in the universities of applied sciences you will find you could say the major group of professions, of occupations, like for instance nursing, like professions in commerce, like teachers for primary schools, etc. That's all in the universities of applied science. Journalism is also there in the Netherlands. And then you have the what we call the research universities, so the research-oriented universities. Utrecht University is a research university, but is partly located on the same location as the Utrecht University of Applied Science. The research universities in the Netherlands are more or less of the same level. That means that in their accreditation process, they all have to match certain standards. So there's not a hierarchy on between the research universities, and neither is there a hierarchy between the University of Applied Sciences, although everybody has his preferences. PhD programs you can only find at the universities of the research universities. Now, when we go to the next slide, then you see that although the two types of institutions are relatively separated from each other in their organization and their programs, there are all kind of ways to switch from the one to the other. So the major programs in the universities of applied science are bachelor degrees programs, 4-year, 240 credits. And when you have finished your first year, you can from there you can go to the research university. Now you see that there are different cycles, and the first two are dealt with by both types of universities, and the third cycle is dealt with only at a research university. That's you could say the basic element of the Dutch higher educational system, and you can see that in both types of higher education you see traditional professions. So teachers you see both on applied sciences up to what we call the second degree. First degree teaching is in research universities. Nursing is in the applied sciences university, and medicine, pharmacy, and dentistry is in the research university. So there is not always, it's more sometimes a kind of a historical logic why the one is either of the two tastes in higher education that we have. Now, how is this related to continuing education? And maybe when we go to the next slide, then then the landscape even becomes more fragmented. To begin with, until 5 years ago, the research universities in the Netherlands, to a large extent, said we are not considering continuing higher education as part of our regular primary process. That was, you could say, the general idea. And when you look at where continuing higher education took place, that was in different forms. Part of it, especially when it comes to, you could say, the second chance for a university degree, there was already 30 years ago was a new university established that took care of that, and that was the Dutch university, which is called the Open University, based in Heerlen in the province of Limburg. And there you could, partly through distance learning, could also as an adult obtain a university degree. To a certain extent, continuing education was related to specific occupations. For instance, in the domain of law and the judiciary, they have their own training institute. In the field of pharmacy, they have their own training institute for continuing education. But to a certain extent, also some parts of university also have their tradition in continuing education. For instance, the Julius Center of the University Medical Center in Utrecht also provides schooling for doctors. And that fragmented landscape became, you could say, the last decade, 20 years, more and more of a problem. Who was responsible for continuing education for professionals? Not only for those professionals who want to stay on the front line of the existing knowledge, but also professionals who were looking for broadening their perspective or maybe reskill themselves in another profession. And we didn't have really the tools or the infrastructure to do that in a coherent way. And that did lead to slowly to a change in perspective, not only at Utrecht University but also nationwide. Now, looking at the next slide, you can say that we were a few years ago in the following situation. It is fragmented. Professional associations play an important role. Independent institutes, like I just showed for pharmacy, play an important role. Universities of applied science, in contrast to research universities, have a longer tradition in continuing education, as they are more directly connected with professional association or interest groups of occupations. Open University I mentioned, but there is also a whole range of commercial providers of continuing education, also in higher education. For instance, when you look at the domain of veterinary sciences. Now, the research universities only started recently to accelerate their activities in continuing education, and only the last 2 years you can see that on the level of the association of universities, there really is there really are the first steps taken to come to a coherent offer in which the potential professional or client can find his way. Then, as a result of this, it is kind of a very difficult. Sometimes one of our professionals who follow the course said it's a kind of a swamp to find out where you have to be for what kind of continuing education. Now, from that fragmented landscape, we now are in the following situation. And maybe when we look at the next slide, I go to Utrecht University. What you see on this slide is on the left the traditional building in the old town of Utrecht, where a few of the faculties are based. And on the right side, you see the science park, and you see for a large part buildings of Utrecht University, but you see at the same time there are a few of those buildings are part of the Utrecht University of Applied Sciences. So this is the context. This is also where the venues will be for our conference next June. But I'm not going to show you all the details of Utrecht, but I want to focus on the policies that we are trying to implement when it comes to continuing education, and that we will start with in the next slide. And to be honest, I forgot that I had this slide in it as well. Just to give you a few key figures of Utrecht University, we exist since 1636. We have around 50 bachelor programs and 150 master programs. We have a whole range of different courses and programs for professionals, but they vary between small modules of 4 or 5 days until complete executive master programs. We have around 30,000 students and a large number of alumni as well. And to the next slide, I'd like to introduce you to a vision for continuing education that we developed over the last years. When you look at universities and research universities, you see that when we look at education, often we primarily speak about bachelor programs, master programs, and to a certain extent about PhD programs. What is left out often in our regular communication is continuing education as one of the parts of the primary process. And one of the things that the Utrecht University said 5 years ago for the first time is that they said, we want continuing education to be and become an integral part of its primary process. And that has to be embedded into the organization, into regular work processes. So not something that is apart, standing alone in a separate organization, but integrated in the university as a whole. And the reason for that is that we see our involvement in continuing education directly related to the impact that we can have through our research, to our expertise on society as a whole, and in relation to education and research. So continuing education is seen partly as an element of valorization of our expertise and research as well. And we think this is important, because we think that through continuing education as a university, and that's also our own interest, is that we can connect our research outcomes and our expertise directly to those professions and professionals who need it, and to those domains of society where it is needed. And in our perspective, that is more effective than only training the new generation. So when you train the new generation as well as the professionals that we trained 20 years ago, then we think we can be more effective in bringing our knowledge there where it is needed. Furthermore, and a fourth point of the vision for continuing education of Utrecht University is that we do think that although we as universities are often supply oriented, we think that when it comes to continuing education, co-creation of programs, co-creation of knowledge with professionals, alumni, societal partners is key to make continuing education a success for research universities. So you could say this is more or less the umbrella under which we developed our policies for continuing education, which I will continue on the next slide. What continuing education, what kind of aims we have with investing in continuing education is multifold. First of all, we think that we can contribute to the policies that are both in the region, the local region in Utrecht, but also on a national scale in the Netherlands, but even within the context of Europe. We think that through continuing education, we can contribute to a more innovative and knowledge-intensive economy. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we think that continuing education is also supporting the employability of professionals, not directly in functional terms only, that you need it for being able to exercise your profession, but also to be kept inspired and to be kept motivated for your work. So, and continuing education plays an important role there as well. The traditional role, of course, we do not lose out of sight. So to help students, professionals, alumni to keep their qualifications up to date. But we also want to be responsive to alumni and to other professionals who want to broaden their perspective and who want to be retrained in new fields, who see that their professions change and need other expertise in other disciplines to help them to take part in this transformation. Furthermore, a more higher end aim that the university formulated was that they thought, well, if we have as a university in our mission statements saying that we want to contribute to solving social problems and maybe even global public issues, we can do that, we can contribute to that in a better way when we also invest in continuing education. And last point is that we are very much aware that we probably teach our young generation for a larger part for professions that do not exist at this moment. So we are training them for a labor market that is transforming and that will transform in the future as well. And to help to play a role in this transforming labor market is also a part of the Utrecht University vision for continuing education. On the next slide, I would like to show you a bit about what continuing education is and looks like in our field. And to be honest, when we talk about continuing education, we, for the large part, focus on that part of education that we offer for and that we organize in cooperation with professionals and professional organizations. And it includes a wide range of activities, from small open courses to in-company programs, to programs that can be selective, that can be tailor-made, but it can be in length. It can be very different from very small scale summer school to longer courses and master programs, but maybe even sometimes a one-day courses or two-day courses are also part of our offer. It is aimed at people who are working at, and here's one word missing I see, at the level of, you could say, of people who have a degree in higher education, at least at the level of University of Applied Science, but that does not mean that they do need a diploma for that, but that maybe through experience they are working on that level. And the last point in this, of the last two points here, is that when we talk about continuing education, we are looking at a part of our primary process that's privately funded, that usually is privately funded, and that's paid for either by the participants or maybe organizations that they work in, or maybe grants that they receive. And the last point is that we want to respond to all kinds of needs of specific groups on different types of levels. I see that there are several questions, but as I discussed with Timo earlier and Eva, we will take those questions after the presentation. Next slide, please, Timo. What we maybe another element that we look at when we talk about continuing education is that we looked at for what purposes is this continuing education meant. As we see that in different parts of university, you see that there are different that different domains are focused, or different types of continuing education have a focus on. First of all, it is staying in your own discipline and be kept updated with the most recent insights and expertise. Secondly, we are more and more confronted with questions from professions that say, well, when I started my professional career, I was able to do that completely within the limits or within the frame of my disciplinary teaching. So when I had my degree to work as a doctor, I knew what I had to do. But now I have to work together with other domains. So there's more of a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary teams that I have to work in, and new fields become relevant have become relevant for my profession, and they wanted to do retraining. And what we want to do is that we want to be responsive, and I used the word indeed earlier, as Timo just said. What we want to do is to connect and have a dialogue with those professions or with their occupations. What kind of knowledge is relevant for them, how it relates to our research, and how we can integrate that also in continuing education. So the content of a program is very much relying also on the needs analysis and needs assessment that you do together with the people in the field. And maybe it's good to mention here that when we look through our eyelashes on, you could say, the tradition, what we see happening in all fields of continuing education, we see that one part is indeed about knowledge transfer, but it's as much as important to engage in a dialogue on how to apply this knowledge in different professions. And maybe the third element is that many of our students, our participants in continuing education, also want to take part in continuing education because it offers them an opportunity to enlarge their network, but also to discuss cases from their own professions with their peers in these kind of courses. And that's why we value highly a kind of responsiveness in how we, not only how we design, but also how we execute our programs in continuing education. And of course, also new retraining in a new area is important. And what we do find important in our programs is that it is that we very much focus on, you could say, the research profiles that we have as a university. As a university, we have several discussed and selected a few strategic themes. For instance, institutions for an open society or for a sustainable future, and we have a focus on these kind. We want to create a focus on these kind of issues as well. Next slide, please, Timo. What do we want to achieve for the coming years? We are very much aware of that when we look at what we have at present at Utrecht University in continuing education, that we have a few, you could say, domains where we have quite an extensive offer already. That is, for instance, in the field of medicine and in veterinary sciences, that is in the field of teaching and education, and that's in the field of law and governance. But there are many other domains that are very promising and where there are several needs, especially in the field of youth, but also when it comes to ethics and integrity, etc. And we want to invest in creating a greater variety and a larger amount of courses. And we want it to be an integral part of the educational offer of all faculties. And what I mean here with the word integral is that when it comes to the organization in the university of the faculty, we now have, for instance, directors of studies of bachelor programs and master programs, but often not yet of programs for continuing education. And we think that they also should be part of the board of studies, for instance. And we want to have it directly connected also with our research, so that when we have a research program, we have a kind of you could say institutionalized way of thinking of how that research could become part of the continuing education courses that we offer. What we also want to establish, and we are not, and that's also yet only fragmented in place, is have more structured collaboration with those professional organizations and alumni. It is at the moment it's more incidental, more ad hoc. It's fragmented, only visible in some places, and we want to have that more widely organized throughout the university as a whole. And to be honest, in order to be able to do that and to give this continuing education its rightful place in the primary process of the university, we need also to generate a stable flow of income, as it is not financed by the Dutch Ministry of Education. And we need that, otherwise you to a certain extent you cannibalize your research staff. So you need also to have you could say research. You have to be able to invest also in research by investing in this kind of education. And we want to make more clear how our continuing education really is helping to solve social problems. So we want to create also more of an evidence base on the effects of what we are doing. Timo, maybe we are going to the end, but then this is what I just showed you as the policy of Utrecht University. Is also that is something that is more and more discussed on the national level of the Association of Dutch Universities, and most of the Dutch universities said, well, we want to go in the same direction, to join forces, and to have through our continuing education more impact in a world that is changing. And that's one of the reason that we did choose this as the leading slogan for our conference next year. And for the last slide from my part, this is also reflected in the policies that we developed this also, and that we discussed, is also visible in other countries in the Netherlands, and that we see that that in many places we are looking for how do we impact societal change through university continuing education, but also how can we make that happen? So we want to look at that. We also want to see how different forms of didactics can take place, and are the university premises maybe always the best place to have university continuing education, or can that be maybe also in other forms and other formats? And the last part is, when you say that you want it to be an integrated part of your primary process, how do we do that? How do we organize that at our universities? Well, that's something that Eva will continue to tell us more about, how we try to make that visible, how these three strands will be visible in our conference next June. Timo, I give the floor back to you.
Thank you, Wieger, and I stopped sharing for a moment to just to have an opportunity, maybe for a quick response from the audience. Or do you see, Wieger, a question that you would like to answer right now, as I think we are ahead of schedule a little bit?
Yeah. To be honest, I did not open my chat when talking and sharing at the same time, and my screen was too small for that.
Yeah.
So maybe when you or Eva can guide me through the questions, or pick one or two out.
I can put them on the screen for you.
Yeah. I think there's maybe one from Balas. He was asking, what type or form of dialogue do you have amongst Dutch universities on university continuing education, and how active is that platform?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much for that question. Well, we have in the Netherlands, we have two different associations. We have an association of universities of applied science, and we have a association of research universities in the Netherlands. At this, I'm most familiar with the latter, and the association of research universities started almost 1.5 years ago a specific task for a working group in which all universities are represented on the highest level. And I'm part of that, representing the chair of the board of Utrecht University. And there we look at all kind of different elements. So there are different sub-working groups. And one of the things that we are doing at the moment is to design a website on where all the offers that are in continuing education of all universities can be accessed, and that you can filter and look for. That's one thing. Another thing is that we are looking at how can we make adults and professionals, create a more flexible context for when you are, for instance, looking for specialization or maybe even a degree, so that we accept each other's programs and that you can combine it to your own tailor-made program as a professional. Another thing is that we have a subgroup with which I'm chairing on also quality policies for continuing education, and how can we also in bachelor master programs we have students involved also in quality assurance. How do you do that with small programs? And are students that follow a summer course in Utrecht, are they regarded also to be an alumni from our university, and do they have access to library? I mean that kind of programs are part of creating a kind of a foundation for a regular form of continuing education as part of our primary process. I hope is that answering your question more or less? Okay, thank you.
It seems like thank you, Wieger. And I assume all these structures are also very important when you said earlier about this that this is to be integrated to the research and other kind of teaching, and then that there's this responsiveness idea to the labor market needs. So I could imagine that these kind of ideas need to be discussed with professors and teachers in all kinds of levels and all kinds of disciplines, that they would kind of adopt this idea how to approach the continuing education or continuous learning.
Yeah, exactly. And what you see happening at the moment, just to give you an example of how it works, is let me give you an example from my own department. I'm working at the School of Governance, so policy, public policy, leadership issues. That's, you could say, that are topics that are dealt with in my department. We were approached a few years ago by the Ministry of Education, who said to us, and they are also the Ministry of Culture, and it was the part of the Ministry of the section on culture that approached us, that said we are dealing with quite a broad domain of cultural institutes, museums, theaters, musical orchestras, etc. And the people who are working there, also in leadership position, often were professional performers. They are not trained in policy making. They are not trained in leadership and how to lead a big organization and how to work on the market and in competition, etc. Could you develop for us a program, leadership in culture? And so we started with that, and we thought we organize a program where we have partly knowledge transfer, but also intervision, also applying of this knowledge in the specific context of the domain of culture. And we thought we'd do that 2 or 3 times, and then we have all the senior managers in the Netherlands we had. Okay, but now I think we started with our 8th edition of this program. So even provinces asked us, bigger cities asked us, in Belgium, Flanders asked us to organize this with them. And there you develop and design a course by talking to both people from the sector and from the ministry. And you try to figure out together what is the kind of competencies that are needed and what kind of academic expertise is needed to develop those competences. So that's just one example. We try to engage in that kind of dialogues to help us design, and that doesn't take years. Sometimes 2 good meetings and 2 panels are already enough to start with the first design, and then for us from feedback, etc. And then you just have a pilot and you adapt. It's to the experiences of this first pilot session. So that's more or less the way that we work.
Yeah, so you improve as you go, but I think first of all you really need to have this forward-looking approach as an academic, that you are not only following the careers how they develop, but you have to have a vision that this is how they are going to develop, and our university has something to say to that process of professions being developed and changing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, maybe to add to that, Timo, if I may, what we see in some places is that there is a kind of a stagnation in the development of continuing education that is related, you could say, to our very individualized way of doing research. So we see, for instance, last week I spoke to a colleague of my professor at the Department of Pedagogy at the Social Sciences, who does really magnificent research, especially in deprived groups of youth. And she is asked constantly to give lectures at conferences and seminars, etc. But it's all depending on her and her expertise. And the problem is she only has a few evenings a week or one Saturday morning available. So you are reaching, you could say very, very soon, you are reaching the point that she cannot have anything else extra on her agenda. But then you limit yourself, and we are discussing now, how can we use your expertise and create a format through which you will still have a free Sunday afternoon, but we can accommodate the needs from the sector that is in need of your expertise, and that's kind of, you could say, the experiment that we are in at the moment.
yeah, but we will not reveal all our secrets yet. So thank you for this wonderful presentation and thoughts. I think there will be a lot of appetite for the Utrecht conference next year. And next we will move to the other topic that we have today, and that's of course related the call for contributions. And here I will give the floor to Eva CENDON, who is our vice president in Eucen, but also a chair at University Continuing Education, Teaching and Learning at Fernuniversität Hagen. So please, Eva.
Thank you very much, Timo, and also thank you very much, Wieger. I mean, we have already some, how would you say, some time together in developing actually the concept of the conference, and I have to say it was really, well, an eye-opening and I think a very constructive process together. So it's now my pleasure to say a bit more about this call that we developed actually together. And I think, Wieger, what you already said about Utrecht is, and what you are developing, I think a lot of is really like, how would you say, mirrored in our call of contributions, because it really puts special, how would you say, spotlights on university continuing education and on university lifelong learning, because I saw already that Christina Paulus was asking about UCE and what about ULLL. So I think we come to that also in a moment. So may I ask you, Timo, for the next slide, please? So as Wieger already has pointed out, we have developed 3 strands for contributions for the conference. The impact of societal change on UCE, the future of education and modern workplace learning, and university continuing education as professional practice within universities. With regard to the impact of societal change on university continuing education, I think there were already a lot of topics we had in this ULLL Open Fora the last few weeks, when we talk about, when we think about green transitions, when we think about SDGs, if we think about the disruptive changes that are impacted also by COVID-19. There is the issue on one hand on what do we have, what are the demands that we have on professions and also on professionals, and what does that mean for university continuing education? And how can we, and I think these are some of the questions that we were asking ourselves, and that we of course ask also to you, and when we call for your contributions, is also the question how we can circulate the knowledge, bringing together the different actors, actually the things in the professions, the business, the government, but also ourselves in higher education. And then there is the issue, and as Christina pointed out, the question of name, university continuing education or university lifelong learning. What does this mean to different universities and societal actors and sectors? And I think Wieger has pointed out that it's quite important to talk about continuing higher education. We have different names for it, and also we encapsulate different, different perspectives on university lifelong learning. So, and of course, one issue regarding the societal change is also the question, what needs to be learned and what needs do our learners have in the different sectors they come from. The second strand, and this is something very close to also topics we discussed in these 4 weeks, is the issue of future of education and modern workplace learning. I think we talked a lot in 1 week about work-based and workplace learning, but the question is, how can we actually pick that up? How can we see how professionals acquire, expand, adapt, and also unlearn knowledge and skills? And what does this mean for our educational concepts within university continuing education or university lifelong learning? Another issue, another question for the call for contribution is the question about innovative, future-oriented teaching and learning within our programs. I mean, it's not only about digitalization, though this is also an important topic, but also what are the new pedagogies, or maybe it's the old pedagogies we already have, but what does this mean? How do we reach? And this is also an issue that Wieger was already pointing out when he talked about the different, you know, shorter programs, longer programs, degree programs. How do we reach the different target groups of learners at the workplace? I mean, what do they need? And some of them want to do whole degree programs, others just need short programs or just very to the point programs. And so I think this is one issue, but the second issue when we talk about the future of education is more related to the university as whole and the question that UCE can play in there. I mean, it can be, if you want to understand it like that, as innovation laboratory where things will be carried out, innovations will be done, and that could then like spill over to teaching and learning of bachelor and master programs. So I think a lot of can be tried out there. And there, of course, is the question, what are the future representations of professional learning? And how, and I think this is also something that's very much connected to work-based learning at least, how can we support learners to develop as reflective practitioners within their different professional contexts? And well, the last point I think is something that is a long story within already Eucen, but still it changes by the questions that we pose, that the societal changes, but also the issues we have within our universities. And that means university continuing education as professional practice within universities, which means what are the business processes that we integrate in our structures? What are the legislations we work with, and we have them both on the national level, but also on the European level. What are the quality assurance systems we have, and how do they change also with the way we change our professional practice within the universities? And how can we relate and better relate research, university continuing education, and professional practices? And actually this brings me to the target, to the formats, and also to the target groups of our conference. And maybe please, Timo, the next slide. In Eucen, we we address different actors within university continuing education. And looking at the list of people being here today, I see people who are doing more research on university lifelong learning and on university continuing education. But we can also see a lot of practitioners within university continuing education, which means both as teachers or as lecturers, but also as like developing programs for university lifelong learning. And then also the group of like management staff, which would be management staff within university continuing education, but also people who are responsible for on a wider university level for organization and administration. And for these different groups, for this conference, and also for linking them together, we thought about 3 types of contributions. The first one is something that is, how would you say, a normal research paper, if you like, but research papers including both conceptual or empirical work with regard to our streams. These are contributions that could be presented in 20-minute time slots within the conference. We have, on the other hand, and I go now to the last one, short papers on organizational and administrative innovation. So I think this is something that we are very interested within this conference to see how we can manage UCE as professional practice within our universities. And in the Netherlands, especially, this is something at the moment, I would say, evolving, if you like. And in between, and this is a new format we invented, is what we called testing ground laboratories. And with that, we are thinking of innovative ULLL practices, but not in thinking of presenting them as giving a short input or a short lecture, but letting the participants experience that. That means that's why we have more time for that. And that means that people could experience how we teach, how we do things, how we bring innovation within our practices. And this includes also then evaluation and reflection part together with the participants. So I think with these 3 formats, we try to encapsulate all the different target groups we have within Eucen, and of course within our university, being concerned with university lifelong learning. And maybe the last slide, Timo. This is the most important part. Abstracts, please send them to us online on the website that already was presented, and you can see it here too, until the end of January 2021. Online, you will find everything online there. There will be a selection process then at the University of Utrecht, headed by Wieger BAKKER, for the selection of the contributions within these different categories. And there will be possible to write papers for all of these different categories I was talking in a minute before about. And the papers need to be handed in by the 30th of April 2021. We will, the selected papers will be published in our e-journal of the Eucen e-journal on the one hand, but on the other hand, there will be also maybe possibilities for very good research papers, especially to find other ways of maybe bringing them to publication too. So this is my final, and I see already Timo coming here. So Timo, I give you the floor now. Thanks.
Thank you, Eva. And as it seems that we are very accurate with the time, so thank you, Eva. And I would maybe say just to conclude her talk, that this conference is not to just come and listen to others, but really to come and participate. And therefore there is this new way of participating, also this ground testing laboratory. I think it sounds very good. Now I would invite you to put on your videos, so we could have like the closing discussion together, like a real face-to-face session, as it is possible, mediated by this Zoom. But Maybe I would ask Carmen to say that is there a kind of a question that urgently needs a response either from Mihe or Eva? Would you say something there? What would be a good question? So, for example, Christina asked about where do you see university lifelong learning and continuing education? Is there a difference? I think this goes to Wieger, maybe.
Yes, thank you very much, Timo. Yeah, definitions are always a bit problematic, but when I look at and we struggled with that as well. What kind of wording do we use here? For us, university lifelong learning is a bit broader than continuing education. Continuing education is focusing, you could say, on already educated professionals that are reskilled, upskilled, or whatever. But lifelong learning also refers to more open outreach activities. We have this program in all Dutch University, which is called Studium Generale, where all kind of issues in all disciplines are through open access available when it comes to lectures, etc. But on the other side of the spectrum, we also have quite an extensive program with secondary schools and even primary schools to get a larger diversity of youngsters interested or connected with university. So yes, I think that we see university lifelong learning a bit broader than continuing education, but continuing education is a major part of university lifelong learning in our definition.
Yeah, and I would assume that in your definition of the terms, you also need to address this question of people taking up another career or changing profession or changing the branch of the industry they are working with. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. Sometimes in the executive master programs I'm teaching in, we often see people who already have a higher education degree, but for instance in geography, and they become experts in public governance, and then they say, okay, I want to also have a university degree on public governance. But what for us is very interesting, and also something that we are looking on how to respond to that, is that the requests that we get are more and more multi and interdisciplinary in nature. So for instance, from the science faculty, dealing with data science and artificial intelligence, they're also very interested in organizational science to see how it works out inside organization, how to deal with data science, etc. So there are more and more multi and interdisciplinary programs in which faculties cooperate in a joint offer.
exactly, yeah. Now we have 2 more minutes left, so maybe I would pick the question, the last one from Mahmoud. So do you think that COVID-19 will have an impact on the continuing education service and the kind of training that will be delivered?
Yeah, definitely. And in 3 ways. What we see is, to a certain extent, it makes life difficult, especially when it comes to this connecting, networking, intervision, meeting each other, etc. On the other hand, it is causing also a steep learning curve on how to develop our repertoire of teaching for diverse groups in different contexts. Like we have this meeting now together, which sometimes offers opportunities that we thought of but did not implement. But now we are implementing it because we need to. And it brings new. It also brings new sets of needs. The new needs are articulated in relation to COVID-19. So especially what we see is that when you do not meet each other often, on a regular basis, you are looking for other forms of inspiration. So there is like TEDx kind of settings, short, concentrated speeches or meetings there's new need, and we are just discovering what kind of possibilities there are.
Exactly. Now I think we are running out of time, so Carme stopped sharing, and I would maybe like to conclude this event for thanking both Wieger and Eva for great presentations, and to really motivate everybody to come and join us in Utrecht next June. And I'm quite hopeful that we will get to be there face to face and really enjoy our discussions. So thank you, everybody. And Carme, what happens next? This is the last session.
Well, it happens that we can have some rest.
Yeah.
It happens that now we will send a feedback form. I hope that everybody answers, because it will help us for next year to make it better, probably. But only thank you, everybody, for participating and for being so collaborative. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Carmen. It has been a really wonderful experience, I think, for myself and all of us to have this opportunity to engage into this academic content every day. So thank you, everybody, and see you soon.
Thank you, Timo.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. See you. See you in Utrecht.